So this book is for real people doing hard things. This isn't a book to remove the challenges of life. It is to take the part of to take the part of you that shows up when you least expect it and show you how to get it to show up when you most need it. You have stages you're already performing on and stages you might like to perform on. And the question is, would you like to show up there as the heroic version of yourself? That's all we're doing with the alter ego. We're consciously and intentionally choosing to bring the best version of ourselves forward to the different roles we play in life. Your alter ego is really about finding how you want to show up, defining the superpowers, and borrowing the characteristics of an existing person, character, superhero, animal, or whatever to help activate your heroic self. How's it going, guys? Mayo rhymes the KO here, BigRia.com. This is a book review, quantum book review, our one-page book review. It's like the 80, 70, 80, 90% of a book in 3 paragraphs. Book review of The Alter Ego Effect, the power of secret identities to change your life. My one-sentence summary, how to categorize the best versions of yourself and bringing them out at will. I got so much great feedback from our last 3 or 4. Or how many have we actually put up? I thank you so much for the feedback. Really appreciate it. Because of that, I'm doing these, continuing to do this. So there's some overlap with this book and some of our other stuff, the male book spectrum that Anna and I have developed. Basically, this idea is that you create a superhero, or there are superheroes within you, and when you understand how to bring them out when you need them and bring them out to tackle things that happen in your life. Go to BigRia.com, the #1 channel on YouTube for Indiana real estate. We're also building the world's largest organization, especially needs business owners and real estate investors, all kinds of badass stuff, really cool stuff. Go there, BigRia.com. Okay, so so this is gonna be maybe not such a great book review because I have so much to this concept. If you've read any of my sales letters, any of my material, I talk a lot about Superman and Batman, and this idea, I'm not saying nobody's ever said it, but I'm saying so far I'm the only person that I've ever seen that said it. This is the only guy, this book, I think Tom Herman's his name, is the only person who's figured this out. This is really cool. Here's an excerpt from the book. I've always been fascinated by comics, comic book heroes, and the worlds they live in. The origin stories, the villains, the epic battles always found a way to draw me into their worlds. Now, here's a riddle for you. Think about this, okay? This is really pretty powerful. If you've read, I've used this example, I've talked about this many times in different sales letter and different copywriting that I've done. Everyone knows that Superman and Clark Kent are the same, but which one is the alter ego? I've asked this question for the past 15 years, countless times in front of audiences around the world, and 90% of the audience immediately yell out, Superman. That sounds right, because when you think of alter egos, you think of superheroes, heroism, and epic battles, all the qualities of a superhero like Superman, except it's wrong. The alter ego isn't Superman, it's Clark Kent. Superman is the real person. He created the alter ego, the mild-mannered reporter, Clark Kent, as a useful persona to go unnoticed day to day on Earth and to blend in to help him achieve a crucial goal, understanding humans. Superman would flip between his alter ego and the S on his chest at precisely the moments when he needed each persona the most. This really is pretty much the entire summary of the book, that you need to create, like if you want to work out but you're not working out, create Workout Man, and that's the guy who goes and works out for you. But this idea of Superman, most people, like the difference between like Peter Parker dresses up like Spider-Man. Bruce Wayne dresses up like Batman. But Superman is different in this regard. He's the only hero, or he used to be the only hero, who, actually I think he still is. He doesn't actually dress up as anybody except Clark Kent. He is Superman. He is, when he dresses up, when he wears the S on his chest, that's what he was sent to from Krypton here on. It may sound like I'm giving this a lot of like serious thought, which we have. This is something really important. Do we talk more about this, or do I have to go into this more? Okay, so so think about this. Superman's costume is Azumeo, right? He dresses like Azumeo, right? Same thing I have to do, right? Clark Kent he's weak, he's a coward, his stupidity. When Superman dresses up like Clark Kent, usually these are 3 to 5 minute reviews. This one's going to be a little bit longer, I think. But because there's a lot to say about this. Clark Kent is Superman's image of what he thinks of us. Stupid, weak, cowardice, right? That's what Superman, when he looks at humans, like he said, when he needs to understand humans, that's what he thinks of us. He thinks that we are like that. That's how Superman sees us. There's some great lessons from this. Batman versus Superman. So I've often talked about, when I write copy, I've said, what would you rather have, Superman's powers or Batman's toolkit? And everyone says Superman's powers, because then you wouldn't need anything. But here's the thing. When they made the movie Batman versus Superman, which I've been talking about this long before Ben Affleck, but they actually got survivalists, they got physicists, they got different medical professionals and different fighters and different all kinds of people together, and they asked them to be very serious about this. Who would win in a fight? Like a molecular biologist, who would win in a fight between Superman and Batman? And almost all of them came to the same conclusion, that Batman wins pretty much every time. Why? Because he doesn't have superpowers. Because Batman has to be resourceful, right? And that's the key. The ultimate resource is resourcefulness. I said that, and then Sun Tzu stole it from me 2,000 years ago. From The Art of War, it's one of the most important lines. The other one is, the opportunities multiply as they are seized, right? This is a really pretty interesting thing. There's a lot of lessons to take away from this, but one thing I'd say is that whenever you're looking at business building or real estate investing or anything, it's not to try to be Superman, it's to try to be Batman. It's to get that utility belt, because if you can get resourceful enough, you can do as many deals as you want. Also, this whole idea of hero narration, this is exactly what we've started doing with our heroes. I've taken taken this comic book stuff much more seriously since we started doing this. We started with young people, but basically write your life as if it's a comic book and talk about yourself in the third person as the narrator of a comic book. The hero was nervous, but he made the calls anyway. The hero knew that when he met the young lady that she was irresistibly attracted to him, and they'll be like, who are you talking about? Right? It's kind of funny, but constantly narrate your life as if it's a comic book, and always ascribe the positive attributes to you. Describe your life with origin stories. This is a whole nother thing. I could do a whole separate class on this, but this idea of creating an alter ego that has there's a lot of stuff here that could have gone a lot deeper. The author could have gone a lot deeper on, but this concept of having an origin story, a comic book hero, making yourself a comic book hero. A comic book hero has things he's against, has things he's for, and things he's against, and use those things constantly in your language. When I was growing up in my house, the number one worst thing to say about somebody, fighting words, is to call someone lazy. Look at how much that governs our stuff today, calling people LCs or defeating the LC within you, because everyone has the capacity to be lazy or to be a badass, which is really what the Male Brook Spectrum and what this book, what they're talking about, the alter ego. You can be both. You can be Superman or Clark Kent. You call each one out when you need them. And the whole idea of speaking of hero narration, this is a really important concept. We've talked about this other times. Talk about yourself like you're a superhero. What is this? One of the best movies ever. Unbreakable. Did you really bring this up? Oh my goodness. Oh, I could talk about this movie forever. Did you put all the notes I had in there a second ago? Okay, so one of the best movies ever made. I guess this would be a good time to talk about. I've talked about this many times, but this fits in perfectly with this. So M. Night Shyamalan did The Sixth Sense, which is a great movie, right? And then he did Unbreakable. Unbreakable was after The Sixth Sense. Steven Spielberg read that book and said this may be the best filmmaker ever. Quentin Tarantino said it's one of the best movies ever made. James Cameron said if you want to see the best special effects in any superhero movie, that's the movie to watch. But then you watch it and you think there's no special effects. That's the point what James Cameron was saying. Unbreakable is one of the most fantastic movies ever made. Okay, it's absolutely stunning. And I know people hated on it when it came out, and now it's got a cult following. The same thing happened with Split and Glass. How much of this should I talk about? I could talk about this. Okay, so the question here is, what if Superman was living among us and he didn't know it? What if a man and his son slowly realized that he's Superman? This is man, I don't even know where to start with this book. This movie is so amazing. The original script was actually written like a comic book. This is the question that Unbreakable and Split and Glass ask is, what if comic books were real? What would it look like? But because in the comic books it's slightly exaggerated, right? But in real life, what would it look like if somebody was invincible? And so there's this guy, Elijah Glass, Samuel L. Jackson, by far the best acting he's ever done. He is born. There's so much to say about this. There's so much brilliance in this movie. And I know some people are going to talk smack and say, oh, it's not that. There's a lot of people that talk smack about his movies, and I get it, because sometimes he'll come out with something brilliant like The Sixth Sense or Unbreakable, and then he'll hit us with Lady in the Water or After Earth or something like, oh my gosh, or The Happening with Marky Mark, a horror movie with Marky Mark. Crazy. Only be a horror movie if he was beating up Asians. Look that up, by the way. Don't do it. He's a terrible human being. Look, this idea of Glass. So there's a whole, man, I don't know where to start with this. Basically, Bruce Willis is this guy who gets this, who meets this guy, Elijah Glass, or Elijah Price. Elijah Price is this guy in a wheelchair. He was born with both arms, both legs broken, and he meets Bruce Willis, and he says, I saw that you survived this train accident, and you were survived with no scratches on you. I was born, I believe comic books are real. I was born on one end of the spectrum. I'm weak. Physically, I'm very weak, but I'm very mentally strong. But I thought, because of my physical weakness, there has to be somebody on the other end of that spectrum, somebody who's unbreakable, somebody who's basically invincible, a real life comic book hero. And he said, I bet that person doesn't even know that they're walking around with this power. That's the whole point of like the movie. It says, Bruce Willis at first thinks he's crazy, and he says there's so many. I don't know how to say. Got my skin stuff acting up too. I don't know how much to say about this. I don't know. I don't want to ruin this. You should go check out the movie, but you should check out. So, oh man, there's so much to say about this. This is one of the best movies because of the whole idea of the origin story. So what we find out throughout the movie is that Bruce Willis really does have these powers, but there's one thing that he has. He's allergic to water. He has this whole thing where he's basically, his water is his kryptonite, right? And that's what the movie doesn't make sense, because he never was able to swim, and he's supposed to be unbreakable. He's supposed to be Superman, but water is his kryptonite, just like Superman has a kryptonite. And there's a scene in the movie where he gets thrown into water, and Stephen King said it's one of the scariest moments of any movie, because something as simple as just being tossed into water becomes this amazing epic battle where he's trying to get out, because we think that Bruce Willis, we're not sure if he is a superhero or not. The movie is so great because you don't know it's a superhero movie, and you don't know until like 80-90% of the way through, like, this is a superhero movie. This is like a Marvel movie. That's what the movie is, but it doesn't present itself as that because we don't know for if it's a superhero movie. So I keep going. It's just I don't know how much I keep saying this because I didn't think you guys were gonna put this down. I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but I made a few notes that you had put here. The whole thing. Okay, so at the end of the movie, so I've talked about this movie for years. I've told you to go watch it. You should have gone seen it. The end of the movie, the final scene of the movie, it's like the the twist, but the twist is brilliant. This guy, we find out that Bruce Willis really is the hero, and he sits there and he shows his son because his son thinks he's a hero, doesn't know he's a hero. It's like this goes back and forth. Is he really? Is he not? It becomes, there's this really cool scene of bench pressing where his son keeps putting on more and more weight, and Bruce Willis keeps benching it, and he realizes that there's no amount of weight that he can't bench, that he really is like, he's starting to believe. So at the very end of the movie, you find out that he does have this power to touch people and see evil and go and stop it. And it's really cool stuff. And the scene where he gets dropped in water and he's fighting out of the pool, he gets in a swimming pool, he falls in a swimming pool, but he's like drowning because he's so weak. It's a great example of emotional assignment. For anybody, it's no big deal, especially if you're unbreakable, get out of the pool, but because of his weakness, right? Then he goes out and he chokes this guy. It's like a very anticlimactic in many ways, but that's what makes it so brilliant. That's why James Cameron said that, because it's a real life, like what if a superhero was real? That's what it would look like. Okay, so fast forward to the final scene. Bruce Willis goes in and he realizes he really is unbreakable and he is the guy. And then Elijah Price, Samuel L. Jackson, says, now it's time that we shake hands. And he shakes hands, and it turns out that all those things, including the explosion on the train, he had set up because his whole life he was looking for somebody, a lone survivor, somebody who was unscathed, because he was looking for that person who was on the other end of the spectrum. And that's when we realize that what we've been watching, the origin story we've been watching, we think that it was the origin story of David Dunn, of the overseer, of Bruce Willis. No. What we've been watching is the origin story of Elijah Price, of Mr. Glass. It's, oh my gosh, it's so brilliant. This is the twist, because earlier in the movie he says that, I believe that guy who the hero doesn't even realize he's the hero. In fact, sometimes in comic books, the audience learns with the best time is when the audience learns who the hero is, and they don't know who the villain is until they know who the hero is. And you know how you can tell who the hero is? It's the exact opposite of the villain. There's a scene in The Sixth Sense where the kid is sitting on the bed, and the famous scene where he says, I see dead people, right? And he's sitting there talking to Bruce Willis. He's saying, I see dead people. They don't know they're dead. And as he's saying that, the camera pans in on Bruce Willis. They fought for months on whether or not they should take that scene out because it's too obvious. The reason The Sixth Sense does so well, the reason it hit home so well, is because all the hints were there. Nobody talks to him. Nobody looks at him. Even his wife at dinner. Nobody ever interacts with him except the kid. And when the kid says, I see dead people, and they don't know they're dead, it's them, it's M. Night talking to us as the audience saying, I'm talking about him. And that's why the camera zooms in on him. And that's why the ending is so crazy and so amazing. Was that this computer? We good? That's why it's so crazy, right? So the same thing happens in Unbreakable. He says that, sometimes the heroes and the hero and the villain are friends, just like you and me. So, one person's on one end of the spectrum, the other person's on the other end. And this whole idea of the book where he talks about, he says, you don't know what it's like to go through my life and not have any purpose. I was wondering if you even existed. He's talking about him like he's a soulmate. And then at the very end, the last line he has in that movie, he says, now that we know who you are, this is the idea that he's a hero creator, that he's a mastermind. I'm not crazy. I'm not a mistake. It's this whole idea that he's trying to find his meaning in life. It's the first movie that ever showed the origin story of the villain. And if for no other reason, you should go check it out and study it for that reason. Joker was an example of that. The reason people hated Joker was because there's an old line, if you want to destroy your enemy, understand him, but if you understand him, you won't want to destroy him. And one of the reasons people hated Joker, or were so critical of Joker when it was first coming out, is because it humanizes a mass murderer or whatever, right? It glorifies violence. But really all it does is it gives you the backstory so you understand it. And when you understand Mr. Glass, not that what he did was right, it's wrong, just like what Joker does is wrong, but when you understand their story, there's never been a movie like Unbreakable where you think you're watching the origin story of the hero, but you're really watching the origin story of the villain. And from the very first frame, it's obvious. There's so much brilliance in that. First of all, when we first see Elijah Price, we see him through mirrors. It's two sets of mirrors, through glass, right? Then when we see him as a teenager, we see him through the reflection of a television, glass. When we see him as an adult, it's through the reflection of a comic book cover, glass. We constantly see him through glass. The hints are all there. There's many scenes that are set up in window panes or at the end of hallways in between door frames, like a comic book. The shots set up, the composition is set up so it's like the camera shots like it's a comic book. I could talk about this movie forever if you can't tell. It's brilliant, it's stunning, it's great, it's amazing, and it's the origin story of the villain. And when it's like the whole idea that Elijah Price was trying to figure out who he was. Got this. Am I bleeding? Is that what you're saying? Because I saw this. I don't know. We're gonna have to cut this if I am bleeding. I don't know. Guys, I got all kinds of skid stuff. I appreciate your understanding. I got so many great comments, supportive. I really appreciate that. But if I ever start bleeding, I gotta cut it out, man. I don't want to start, because it starts gashing, even larger gashes. Ain't no thing though. We got to make it happen, right? I keep going on about this. I don't want to give away too much of the movie. I still haven't given away all the spoilers in the movie. But it's such a great movie. It's just really good. And the whole idea that he says, I don't know, now that we know who you are, I know who I am. His purpose in life was to find the unbreakable person. And once he found that person, then he knew who he was. And until he found that person, he wasn't really sure who he was. Okay, so the end of Split is a sequel to Unbreakable, but we don't know it's a sequel until the very end. So there's something called emotional assignment assignment. I've talked about this. Terminator 2 is an example. What happens at the end of Terminator 1? Terminator 2 is one of the best movies ever made. I've talked a lot about that. What happens at the end of Terminator 1? Sarah Connor kills a Terminator. What happens at the end of Terminator 2? Sarah Connor kills a Terminator. But we feel totally differently about it, right? We're cheering it in one example. The other example, everybody's crying. I remember when that movie came out in the theaters, everybody was crying, except me. I had something in my eye. But this idea that the same thing that happens, but you have a totally different assignment to it, totally different emotional assignment to it. I've talked about Galaxy Quest. This was a good movie, actually. It's a really good movie, which is crazy because Tim Allen's in it. It's like, wait a minute, Tim Allen doesn't make good movies, but this is an exception, probably the only exception. And there's a line in there with Alan Rickman, who's this guy who hates his life. But he has to go around and do these Comic-Con events, and he has to say this line that's like, by Alan Rickman's from Die Hard. He was Hans Gruber. He's also a Snape from Harry Potter. And so he's a very like professionally trained, very serious actor, and he has this like cheesy line from the show where he's like, by Grabthar's hammer. And he like hates the line. He's like, by the sons of Horvan. And so he has to go like these mall openings and stuff. And he's like, by Grabthar's hammer, what a savings. Like he hates his life. He hates saying this line. And later on in the movie, there's this scene where this guy who loves him is like, hey, by Grabthar's. And he's like, shut up, don't say the line. He hates the line. But then at the end of the movie, this guy's dying, saving people. And as he's dying, he's like, I know we've never met before, but I want you to know I've always seen you as a father. And he says, look at me. By Grabthar's hammer, by the sons of Horvan, you shall be avenged. And he says the line that he hated. He says it seriously. It's the best part of the movie. That's an example of we attach one emotion, to a line or to a specific piece of dialogue, and then we switch it up. The same thing now means something totally different. Sarah Connor kills a Terminator. At the end of the second one, totally different, because the kid's like, the Terminator asks the kid, why do humans cry? And she's like, I don't know. And then at the end, when the kid's crying, knowing that he has to kill the Terminator, he wipes away his tear and he says, now I know why you cry. And at the end, Sarah says the last line of that movie, I look to the future for the first time with a sense of optimism, with a sense of hope, because if a Terminator can learn the value of human life, then maybe we can too. The transformation is you, the audience. If you can feel one way about a Terminator being killed, yes, great, good job, awesome, right? High fiver. Then in the second one, we feel completely differently about the same thing, the same actors, then there's hope for all of us if we can learn to have emotion for a machine. Anyway, I could talk about Terminator 2 forever too, just like Unbreakable. But the thing with Split, at the very end of the last line that Samuel L. Jackson had, the last line of the movie, in Unbreakable, he says, I knew who I was when the kids used to make fun of me, when they called me Mr. Glass. That's the last line of the movie. He knew he was the villain, but he had to find, oh my gosh, it's too good. It's too good. We saw the making of the villain, not the hero. It was the making of the villain, or the making of the hero too, but by making the villain, we also created by making the hero, we also created the villain. Every writing class, everybody that talks about screenplays or anyone, they all talk about Unbreakable. It's that brilliant. It's spectacular. Now, that line, the last line, Mr. Glass, that's the last words of Unbreakable. The last words of Split, they show this horde, they call it the horde, all these personalities. They go, and the last line is in a diner, and they show the horde being arrested, and there's a girl in the diner who says, you know what, that reminds me, they're calling him the Horde. Wasn't there a guy like that they used to have a weird name? The media called him a weird name, and we hear a voice behind her, Bruce Willis, he says, Mr. Glass. When they say, well, what did they used to call that guy? And he says, Mr. Glass. And the camera zooms in, and he looks up, and only then do we realize that was a sequel. The movie was a sequel. How many movies have done that? How many movies have made a sequel, and you don't know it's a sequel? It's pretty crazy. There's this review, I think this is from RogerEbert.com, or this is when they're explaining that line, that last scene at the end, how brilliant that is. This was one of the best cinema experiences I can remember. Sitting in a cinema, reasonably happy at the way M. Night Shyamalan's latest film had turned out. He's talking about Split, and hoping that this meant he's back on form. And then suddenly a piece of music starts over a rather mundane scene in a diner. As a film music lover and a huge fan of James Newton Howard, I recognized the music immediately. And as the piece progressed and as the scene unfolded, I had a huge smile on my face. There are few things that are completely new and unique in film nowadays. This was one of them. A director who waited patiently for 16 years and then made a sequel to a much-loved film without anyone knowing it was a sequel. Only a fearless artist would make a secret sequel without relying on the built-in audience and only revealing the connection and the promise of a third and final act at the very last scene. Bravo. Again, he didn't even market it as a sequel to Unbreakable. It's absolutely crazy. But the idea that you can take the last words of Mr. Glass, right? It's brilliant when Samuel L. Jackson says it. The same last words of Split, Mr. Glass. But it's a totally different emotion. Oh my gosh, it's a sequel. When you can take the same thing, have emotional assignment added to it, and then change that emotional assignment, it's really, really quite brilliant. And then the last movie is Glass, which you should check out as well. So Glass, I could talk about Glass too. Glass is really spectacular too. The idea that Samuel L. Jackson is always, he's doing hero narration. He's always talking about his life as if it's a comic book, as if it's I won't ruin, I don't try not to give too much away about Split or Glass. But the idea that you write your life, the comic books are real. Your life is a comic book. He's constantly talking about this. His mom says in the scene, at the end of the scene, where it's one of the most best scenes I've ever seen in any movie, where his mom's like, if this this was limited edition, he's dying, and she says, if this is limited edition, why didn't you tell me? Why did you come here? Why would you be here? And he said, it's not limited edition. I had a conversation, a few friends of ours are movie critics, and they talked about this scene. They said, this line doesn't make any sense. He said, it's not limited edition, mama. It's an origin story. This whole thing has been an origin story. All 3 movies have been an origin story. They're the origin story for you, for me, the audience. It's that the idea that we're all superheroes and that there are people trying to talk us out of it. There are people constantly trying to talk us out of, oh, it's not that special. You're not that great, or it's not that unique. It's not that amazing. There's so much I could talk about this, man. I could say so much more about this. It's phenomenal. It's a great, when they, at the very end, when Sam, I'm trying not to ruin this too much. There's a lot I have left out if you think I've ruined it, man. Am I starting to? So the line he has is, as he's dying and he finds out there's somebody who tells him basically everything he said was true. There is a group of people that are trying to talk people out of thinking they're superheroes and blah, blah, blah. And he finds this out right as he's dying. And his mom comes back and he's like, his last words, he says, Mama, I was not a mistake, Mama. And it was the best part. The whole point of his life was that he thought this comic books are real, superheroes are real. And at the very end of his life, he finds out, he's like, they almost convinced me I was crazy. The whole point of this place in Glass is to convince people like superheroes that they're actually crazy. It's a whole crazy, really brilliant stuff. But here's his final words at the end of Glass. I'm not going over there's a whole twist. There's like 3 or 4 twists, really cool stuff. But here's his final words, Mr. Glass' final words. There are unknown forces that don't want us to realize what we truly are capable of. They don't want us to know that things we suspect that the things we suspect that are extraordinary about ourselves are real. I believe that if everyone sees what just a few people become when they wholly embrace their gifts, others will awaken. Belief in oneself is contagious. We give each other permission to be superheroes. We will never awaken otherwise. Whoever these people are who don't want us to know the truth, today they lose. Brilliant. Oh my gosh. So it's all about the origin story. Mr. Glass. I knew who I was when the kids called me Mr. Glass. And this is what he meant to all my critic friends who don't understand how brilliant Split is. I know people talk about Split and Glass and less light than they do Unbreakable. Trust me, 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to talk about Glass and the whole trilogy of movies as some of the best superhero movies ever made. It's going to happen. And this idea that it's an origin story. Who is he talking about? You, me. It's our origin story. That's what all 3 of the movies are. I've talked a lot about this, man. I got to move on. This is like the worst book review ever. So in the book, coming back to the book, I was surprised by this conclusion. I thought this was really weird. So there's one thing I can't coach people on. That's motivation. I won't touch it. It's one of those things that no one can coach you to want or create for you. It's the X factor. I can't make an athlete get up at 4 a.m. to run drills and wind sprints. I'm surprised he talks about this. Given the power of your thoughts and how you can create an alter ego, motivation, you could say, is the one issue that if you solve that, it solves everything else in your life. So I was kind of surprised this was his conclusion. I can't make an entrepreneur want to start and grow a business or to stick with it when they hit the rough patches. I can't make someone want their goal bad enough that they're driven to overcome any and every obstacle, no matter how tough or how high the cost. You have to find that motivation within. And very often the motivation comes from feeling so emotionally connected to what we want that nothing else matters. I love that. Why not focus on that? It's the core purpose of our being. We have to go on this quest, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter the outcome. Very cool stuff. The thing is that thought control really is motivation. That's why I was surprised that he came to this conclusion, because if you can do that, you can do anything. If you can control your thoughts, you control everything, including motivation and discouragement. Discouragement is a choice, the D word, the evil D word. Have the Devil's Class. You should go through that. Okay, so this is the last line of the book here. At the end of your life, you won't remember the thoughts or intentions you had. You'll remember the actions you took. You'll judge yourself by how you showed up, by what you did, what you said, and how you acted, and whether you performed in a way that you knew you could and in any of the stages of life. Just like any coach. When you hear the buzzer sound, I want you to look back and say, I left nothing behind. I gave it my all. I did everything I wanted to, and more important, I showed up as my heroic self with all my capabilities, skills, and intentions, and it toppled dominoes, which changed my life in extraordinary, unpredictable ways, and because I did this, I lived a full life. My final challenge for you, this is the last line of the book, my final challenge for you is to create your alter ego, cross the threshold, and reveal your superpowers to the world. Your mission begins now. Okay, so the whole thing about Unbreakable, I went on this tangent. I don't know, you should probably cut out a lot of that, because I get really excited about Unbreakable. I try to condense it, but there's so much about that movie. There's so much to learn. It probably wasn't condensed very well, and I probably skipped around, but I get excited when I talk about this. I didn't know we were going to say this. I should have put my notes in better order, but Unbreakable, this is Unbreakable. Like, this is exactly what it's about. This idea that there's so many great lines Elijah Price has, Mr. Glass has. Now that we know who you are, I know who I am. You don't know what it's like to go through your life wondering what your purpose is. And when you do have your purpose, they almost made me think I was crazy, but now I know my purpose. And at the end, when they find out the twist of what he did and how he was truly the mastermind, and when he says, you know what I do, this just confirms it. What are the chances of all these things happening? I create heroes. I create superheroes. That's his purpose, his mission. And when you know what your mission is, you're unstoppable. You can do anything. This heroic self, that's what this version is, being the badass version of yourself. That's the book, Alter Ego. That's our book review. Go watch Unbreakable.